Sounds good. Welcome back to the Africa is a Country podcast. We're doing another special episode to talk about our favorite topic, which is the FIFA Men's World Cup happening currently in Qatar. We are joined by the usual suspects, Sean Jacobs, founder of Africa is a Country, as well as Tony Caron, who's editorial lead at AJ Plus, and both of them are the hosts of the Football History and Politics podcast 11 Named People. And we're joined by managing editor Boima Tucker. So it's a full house. It's going to be a great episode.
My first time.
No, that can't be right. Is that true?
Yeah.
This is, oh my gosh.
That is true. I think it's
long overdue. Boima is behind the scenes at Africa as a Country and at the forefront, keeps the wheels turning. So yeah, it's a big honor to finally have you on, Boima. And yeah, let's just get straight to the conversation. I mean, what a World Cup it's been. The group stages have wrapped up. Quarterfinals have happened. We're now heading into semifinals. The major story, of course, being Morocco dispensing with Spain and then Portugal. They face France next. How did this happen?
And don't forget Belgium. Don't forget Belgium.
They got ready and they beat Belgium. I mean, they've not conceded a goal at this World Cup. The only one that they conceded was from an own goal. They basically had to get their own team to score against them in order to have any goals go past their nets. But
what do Spain, Portugal, and Belgium have in common?
Former colonizers of
Morocco.
Morocco, yeah.
And now they have to complete the checklist in the semi-finals.
Yeah.
And Belgium has the largest Moroccan migrant population in Europe.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean,
France is actually 1.1 million in Belgium.
Oh, yeah.
But point B, yes. I mean,
proportionally.
Yeah.
How did this happen, guys?
Yesterday for something I'm writing.
I mean, we should definitely talk about how. Firstly, I mean, we should just congratulate. Tony, you want to jump? Tony wants to.
No, I just want to say what Boima is saying. I think that's a really interesting topic because you know how we normally see, and correctly, like we see teams as representing, the home country. But I think in some ways the Morocco example is the most pronounced one of a team that represents the diaspora. I don't think there's been a better example of sort of Europe's migrant underclass being represented at the World Cup. Like, what Hakimi said after taking that winning penalty about what his parents do, how they made a living in Spain. And, there's Boufal with his mother. And I think this is really profound and different. They've always been sons of immigrants in World Cup teams, but this is a team of the diaspora as much as it is Morocco.
I mean,
if I'm not mistaken, quickly, no player, if I'm not mistaken, no player on the Moroccan team currently was born in Morocco, if I'm not mistaken.
Of the ones who I think are in the starting 11, we have to check on that, but I know that at least 14 of the squad of 26 are from the diaspora, plays for teams outside. There are players on the bench who are born in Morocco and grow up in Morocco, play for local clubs, but the majority of the kind of the players who have carried the burden of the team, they're the diaspora. But just to follow up on Tony's point, when we usually did this game of, when you people are joking that the World Cup, people in the West or Americans treat the World Cup like it's an international relations seminar, which we don't want to do. But when you usually
who would do that?
Who would be that? When you usually think of the World Cup, historically, there was this idea that you have these Africans who played for Western European teams, and I think then you had Africans who from the diaspora who played for their team, like Senegal, Cameroon. All these teams are kind of like that. Here's what I think the difference is. What you usually did was you kind of put your energy or you invested yourself in these like France, England, Belgium. People did that. What I think, to Tony's point, what Morocco does now is you have a team that is, of course, made up of people from these diaspora communities, but this time they're playing in a team that is actually winning.
Yeah,
who's successful at winning. So yeah, people can argue Ghana came to the quarterfinals, so did Cameroon. But there was a feeling, we always felt, so did Senegal, that that's kind of how far we could go. You know, like that story where America will go to the last 16, Mexico will go to the 16. Like, it's in your head. You kind of know that that's the ceiling. And so there had to be like a team that could win. And of course, there are probably another bunch of factors as to why Morocco did it. You know, like better coaching, I suppose, like better setup, you know, letting the coach, there's probably other things in there too. But I think I like the idea that this is a case of no more is it just sort of taken for granted that so France is playing and we just kind of love France because France has got Mbappe and they, you know.
I have an interesting example of this is that I was watching, it was in the last group stage game with Germany was playing Costa Rica and Spain was playing Japan. And Spain was down 2-1, I think, at that time. And they were subbing on Ansu Fati, who for me is like the best migrant story of current football. Like, and I would normally cheer for him in any moment, but that I had this they were subbing him on, and I had this deep sinking feeling come on. Like, no, don't save the Spanish.
I mean, it's incredible that Morocco's coach, Walid Regragui, has only been in charge since August. I mean, Sean, you mentioned just now that one factor that could explain their success is letting the coach. Like, what has that meant for Morocco's national team setup? What have they done differently insofar as giving him a free hand to guide the team in the way that he sees fit? Like, how, the success is kind of surprising because they underperformed in the most recent African Cup of Nations to the extent, you know, they're knocked out in quarterfinals. Heading into this World Cup, no one had them on their radar as a team that would carry the hopes of the continent. Everyone thought it would be Senegal, maybe Ghana, maybe Cameroon. So this is just kind of like, I was taken aback by how well they've done. And trying to understand that from the football, I've not been able to piece together what the recipe is.
They've always, I mean, to be honest, they've always had great teams, like decent football teams. I think people forget that when the first time when African teams directly qualified for the World Cup, so before 1970, you had to play, Africa played Asia, you know, for a place in the finals of the World Cup. And then in 1970, we were given like this one spot, and Morocco had to defeat like everybody basically to get that one spot. And so they were that first African team, you know, Egypt, 1934, Egypt was in the World Cup, you know, and then in 1966, if you remember, Nkrumah said, we're going to boycott this World Cup until they give us a spot, until we can qualify directly to go to the World Cup. So Morocco did do that. They've gone to subsequent World Cups. 86, they were pretty decent when they were basically in with a draw, a 0-0 draw. There was, I think, less than a minute left when Germany scored a goal, and that knocked them out of that World Cup. So it's not like they were in the last World Cup, they were not great. So even myself, before the World Cup started, I think I saw Senegal. I'm probably regretting that tweet now. I saw Senegal as the only team to get out of the first round. I said Morocco would most likely play well, but they would leave their fate, you know, which is sort of what African teams usually do: a couple of draws, a loss, and then you lose. You wait for that last game, and then that's where you think you can pull something off. But they, from the start, you're right, like very, you know, brilliant defending, like tight defending, and then sort of the game against Portugal was just incredible, like scoring a goal on the break, and then just managing the game and winning the match. So that's been, I think, important. And I think Tony's like, he's biting, like ready.
Okay, I want to throw something out here because Morocco, to me, is approaching this on the field tactically, but also the way that they're actually playing, the spirit with which they're playing. You don't see a World Cup player have a shot at goal, miss, and smile, going like, you know what, I'll have another one. Azzedine Ounahi does that, right? The flicks, the touches, you watch when they break, the confidence and swagger with which they play, those little Ziyech's little flicks. It's like, wow, nobody plays like this at the World Cup. It's freedom. It's playing with a real confidence. You watch the way they play the ball out at the back. I'm like, oh my God. Like, no, they're tapping, they're chipping the ball over the attackers. Like, it's little triangles in the corner flag and off they go. It's like, it's playing with on the front foot in a way that very few teams do at the World Cup. And I'm guessing that the coach is saying, show them what you can do. Because if you had your traditional kind of European, like, journeyman coach who's going to come along and kind of, they'll play like Japan plays in their first half. And I love Japan. I love second half Japan, where they go, okay, now we commit. Like, now we take risks. First half Japan is you don't cross the halfway line, right? That's what a European coach would typically impose on an African team. It's like, don't play free football. Play very restricted football, and hopefully
not good enough.
That's one. So
that confidence, the confidence you're talking about, it's not reckless. So it's not like what Ghana, the way Ghana was playing, which is I think Ghana sort of like imitates the kind of Brazilian football. That it's like little flicks. They do it like Brazil does it, like it looks pretty. So, but then it's like the naivete, like I don't want to call it naivete. I'm going to get slaughtered for this, but they just don't know how to close it out. And so Morocco does what you say, Amrabat, when he's like, when he runs from his box, it's just one moves. It's like he gets the ball and he like goes. He just like, it's like something you saw Baggio do like in 1990 or something. And he just keeps going until he gets tackled or he gets a really great pass off. Other African teams, when it's near the end of the game, they ran into a problem. Like what happened to Brazil with Croatia often happened to African teams at the end of a game. That doesn't happen with Morocco.
Could you talk a little bit about the coaching aspect of that? Like, because you wrote about the coaches in your op-ed, and this coach, he's from a successful club side in Casablanca, right?
No, he's actually from France. He had like a career as a player in French leagues. He's from Paris,
but he coaches in Casablanca.
Well, some of his jobs were in Morocco. Yeah, he started, coaching in Morocco. But the key thing here is like more recently, and CAF, the Confederation of African Football, they don't get a lot of praise because they don't run their association, the Continental Association, very well. FIFA stepped in to run them, but the one thing they've done really well, and Walid Regragui, Ali Cissé, they're all products of this. So there's like an investment in coaching, and the coach of Morocco is a product of that first class of African coaches who get their European badges. Like to coach, you need this minimum requirement if you want to go coach in Europe. And in the past, this is why we have these African coaches. These European coaches would go coach in Africa because they have badges. And you would, the association would be impressed by them. Before he became coach, they had, I think, a Serbian coach. So there's that problem of they didn't have qualifications. People didn't trust their abilities. And so now you have somebody, his abilities can be trusted. He also played in the Moroccan national team, which is the other crucial aspect that I wrote about in that piece in the Times, which is you have these coaches who all played in the national team. You have Song, he played for Cameroon. Aliou Cissé played for Senegal. I mean, we've talked about this before. He was in the Senegalese team who went to the World Cup and shocked France and went to the quarterfinals. So it's having these coaches that have a rapport with the players. The story that everybody keeps talking about is the previous coach got rid of Ziyech. He said Ziyech was a disruptive influence on the team. He doesn't want Ziyech to play for Morocco. The first thing that Walid did when he became coach is bring Ziyech back into the team and let Ziyech do what Tony was saying. Play free, make things happen, not do this kind of conservative, the stuff that Messi was making fun of the Netherlands, where he said, like, throw up the long ball and tall guys at us. I'm trying to, Messi was kind of mocking that football. No, although I think Messi was mad that football almost got the better of him. But yeah, so there's something different about the coaching, just better coaching.
Yeah. Messi does it help Morocco, huh?
Yeah. Oh man, we'll
bobos and
I think that's the most we've ever seen Messi say, like, in his lifetime.
Yeah. Whoa. He said the word whoa. He called the guy a whoa.
Bobo.
A bobo, which
Like
apparently
stupid.
means you're a fool, a stupido, right? You're
Yeah.
a fool.
Yeah.
Somebody
Does it help
said
Morocco
that
that
Messi
yeah.
is finally Argentinian. Like he's he's remonstrating. He's remonstrating with the ref. He's talking to his opponent. He never used to say anything.
He handled the ball.
He
Yeah,
handled the
I know
ball.
he-
He got away with it. Yeah, that's like, yo, Messi, what's up?
a
He's
long
doing his
tradition in
Maradona
Argentina.
interpretation.
Yeah.
Can I ask about, because we're talking about where we are, but I actually think the probably most exciting part about this tournament so far has been the group stage. Even though this knockout stage has been fun, but the group stage is filled with a lot of surprises and excitement. And speaking of Messi losing 2-1 to host country Saudi Arabia. Sorry, I had to put that out there.
They were kind of like the host with all the people.
Well, they had a lot of fans. They had
Easy to get there.
100 buses from Saudi into Qatar, so it was kind of like a home game. So, can you guys just talk about your highlights from the group stage, if you remember?
I know it's so long ago. So many games, 4 games a day. I mean, I did love Japan, and I think the fact that Japan can go toe to toe and beat Spain and Germany tells you something about the way, I think we've said this many times before and probably in the class and everywhere else. The globalization of the game has meant not only players moving to that if the European clubs are the NBA of football, like you don't only have the best players in the world playing in Europe, but you also have the coaching, the best coaches in the world, but also the technology, if you want to call it that, of football has been generalized. So there's just no team that's easy to beat anymore. There's no team that comes with a naive style that can be kind of rolled over. There are different idioms and stuff, but you sort of see. And again, I mean, what I loved about Japan, and I mean, I'm banging on about this, is that spirit of like, let's just throw caution to the wind. I mean, it's not entirely that, because you are still defending, you are still keeping it tight, but you're taking risks. You're committing players forward to make sure that when you do create moments, you exploit those moments. By the way, one little footnote there, as a devotee of English football, obviously, I was amazed at how many Brighton players were featuring at this World Cup. Like, for Ecuador, and also, by the way, my favorite player at the World Cup, and I just wish Liverpool didn't already have 2 great left backs, because Estupinian, Pervis Estupinian from Ecuador was absolutely outstanding. I think he might have been the best left back at the World Cup. Caicedo, Mitoma for Japan, Alexis McAllister of Argentina, Brighton, Tariq Lamptey. It's like, wow, this was like this little
Mohamed
club.
Kudus. Kudus.
Was he there previously?
He was in Ghana. No, you're just saying like players that kind of.
Players who, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Kudus is like one of the best. I mean, if we had to pick our best 11 from the group stage, it would be kind of, we should have done that beforehand.
If Kudus had come on for Brazil, it would have been a different story. Anyway, I was hoping Will would give me his before I give mine.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many moments to isolate. I mean, I really enjoyed Richarlison's opening goal for the World Cup, and just that, like, what that meant of Richarlison being this Socrates-like figure who was anti-Bolsonaro, who kind of represents the best of the Brazilian spirit, who comes out as this. He's always been this pro-poor figure behind closed doors, but then now
he also plays for your club, so that's why you love him.
He also plays for my club, so that's why I love him. And I mean, even after their exit, just see like his interactions with fans and the way he's been able to speak confidently about how they're going to pick themselves up from this and try again at the next World Cup and
versus crying Neymar.
versus crying Neymar, exactly. So that kind of antithesis between Lula, Richarlison, and Bolsonaro and Neymar, I think I've
crying and praying Neymar. He was praying.
Also, Neymar is now like, Neymar sounds like a little baby now. Suddenly he's like he's got feelings now. When he gets interviewed about the game now, he's like his eyes all puffy, He's talking about family a lot. I saw this interview with him where he's like, everybody now wants to ask him whether he's playing again. I gotta go hang out with my family. Like, he's suddenly very sweet. But let me give you so for me, I was just happy in the first round that no African team embarrassed themselves, because when the World Cup happens, there's always some, like, we get like in 2014, I remember Cameroon, I think it was against Croatia. It was like a crazy score when Cameroon just got quickly dispatched. I think that was Alex Song and all those guys. It wasn't fun to watch. So, and also of course Ghana with the money. Do you remember Ghana with the plane full of money? So this was just a quiet African first round. Everything was nice. I didn't like that Ghana was naive against Portugal when Ghana scored the goal. Then as Andre Ayew, he goes off the field and he's like celebrating a guy, giving a guy a hug. And the camera catches him as he's like hugging the dude, and he looks around and he's like, what? They scored? And it was like 2-1. So that was just like terrible. That was not great to watch.
And not to mention his penalty.
Yeah, and then he missed his penalty in the knockout. So just unlike the sort of Portugal, Spain beat Costa Rica, I think 7-1. So that was not an African team. So that made me feel good. And then when Portugal beat Switzerland in the round of 16 when they beat Switzerland 6-1. So I was like, okay,
without
crazy numbers is not on us. So that made me for like, if you want like the first round and a little bit of the round of 16, I was happy that African teams weren't being, we weren't naive this time, and we played well. And we'll probably talk about this in a couple of minutes, but the other issue was that feeling of, I didn't think, I was going to watch Saudi against Argentina. I was going to half watch that. I was like, okay, it's Argentina. This is like a formality. And then, of course, that other factor of the crowds from that first round, the Ghanaians, like with the brass music, the whole game, like the Moroccans with the chants, like you said, the Saudis. And suddenly, like, to this point about how do you watch football, you were suddenly like liking how the Saudis play. He's like, I know the Saudi politics, but I was like, I like these guys. I like how they play. So that's what kind of also happened in the first round for me.
But none of these teams represent their country's politics.
No, totally, yeah. This is
exactly. Yeah.
Morocco flies a Palestinian flag, whereas the Moroccan state embraces Israel and ignores the Palestinians. So, sorry, go, Boima.
Well, I was going to say my favorite from that match was the last 10 minutes of the match when they Saudis proceeded to just kick the ball as far as they could into the stands, and then the entire stadium would erupt. I've never seen so much joy for time wasting in my life.
Well, every time when a Moroccan opponent touches the ball, the crowd would whistling or something. They just like had a way of making the whole thing intimidating.
But also what we're seeing there, I think we've said this in previous conversations, is that the World Cup in Qatar is far more accessible to fans from Africa and Asia and the region than a World Cup in Europe or the Americas would be. Just in terms of travel access, ability to get there, and particularly visas. Like, it's not, you probably more than half of the fans in some of those games would not have gotten a visa to go to a World Cup in France.
And also there's just specifically for the Saudi Qatari situation, there's obviously a geopolitical element to that just a few years ago there was a border skirmish,
siege.
Yeah, and
be out. Yeah.
And they've seemed to have moved beyond that, which is good for people. We don't always agree with the government's what their policies are, but the less the world has kind of cross-border conflict, I think is better in all situations.
So an interesting question that this arises, I'll throw a challenging one out, particularly for the Africa as a country comrades, which is, some fans are looking at, because we're all celebrating Morocco, right? And it's like the decentering of the West, and it's Palestine. And this is a team, it's Amazigh as well as Arab, as well as African. And two things I heard. I mean, we know why we're celebrating this, and then you sometimes get people going like,
well, let's say why. Let's say for the audience, we know why, but why are we celebrating it? Let's make that explicit too.
I mean, for me,
why are you celebrating it?
Well, I'm celebrating. This is basically not only the Arab world, not only Africa, not only but also, the diaspora, meaning the underclass on which Europe relies, which Europe abuses terribly in terms of, you just look at the struggles of migrants to get to Europe, and then the places they're assigned in those societies, of cleaning the houses, of street vendors,
police harassment.
And, yeah, it's a victory for everyone who has faced all of that. I mean, in terms of decentering the West and empower, a symbolic victory for migrants, for Africans, for Arabs, for many marginalized communities. This represents something powerful. There's a question mark, but maybe everyone else wants to say why they're supporting. We can come back to the question that I want to ask, we sometimes have to field on that.
Well, yeah, we have to get.
We're there. in a world that is highly unequal. That you have, who has power, who doesn't have power. So then there's this tournament that is being played every 4 years. And for me, it's very different from the Olympics. I don't have much thing about the Olympics, but for this thing, I've always put a lot of energy and this investment into it. And it goes back to when it was Maradona, and I know there's also debates about Argentina and how Argentina views itself as probably like Europe, a little like it has a self-identification as Europe in South America, whatever. But when Maradona took his hand and hit the ball with his hand into the goal, it's illegal, but there's a way that how you experience that. So this is the same way that I think about these things. When Cameroon beat Argentina in the game of 1990, I have the same feeling. So now I have the same feeling with Morocco.
I don't want to stray too far from the topic that Tony brought up.
Those two, yeah.
So what is the dimension of your support for Morocco? What is it?
Africa is the first African team. So I'll be quick because I'll come back to this probably in a minute. But it's the first African team, for me at least, to go to the go to the semifinal of the World Cup. I was screaming for that. I think that's an important thing. I think secondly, I think it's that. And then, there's this kind of big thing called the third world. Some people call it the global south. It's full of contradictions, but that's my other thing as part of it. I think for me, that's basically the two things.
Yeah.
We can debate. I'm mindful of all those other things, and I can debate them. But those are the two things.
So there's another dimension you guys aren't mentioning, and there's this, for the history nerds, there's this historical relationship between the Maghreb and Southern Europe, and Morocco symbolically not only have taken on their the countries where they have a large migrant underclass, but they've also taken on the countries that historically have expelled them from one of the most advanced kind of middle age civilizations that existed, and kicked off one of the most destructive imperial periods of the world, which created transatlantic slavery and the genocide of indigenous people.
When they beat Spain, for me, I was on social media. It was the Reconquista.
Yeah, and Portugal too. And they did Portugal.
Exactly.
And I mean, this is why I think it's beautiful. I mean, there's a great, Christopher Lash is a divisive figure, but he has this great essay from the 90s in the New York Review of Books about the corruption of sports. And one thing we don't admit to ourselves is that part of the joy of sports is that it gives us an outlet for our sublimated desire for war, basically. And what this is, it's vengeance. It's on that metaphysical, spiritual level, what this allows us to glory in is why sports is so enrapturing, is that we can now celebrate with the Moroccans that they've now had the upper hand over their erstwhile conquerors. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think sports still having its connection to that kind of essential purpose of this celebration of what the best humankind has to offer, but also that it's in its ability to transform us or take us beyond kind of like everyday life into this other kind of realm, is I think is beautiful. And that I think is, you know, ever since the game has been modernized and commercialized, it's something that we've lost. But this is like the first World Cup where you feel like there's a team that has a great story. And I think just the beauty of that story, with all of its contradictions, which only add to the greatness of that story, is something to revel in.
Boima, is this going to be you or me?
Well, I don't want to get to the contradictions yet. I just want to stick with this one sec. And I want to ask you guys, many of you, the three of you are, I would consider kind of Marxist scholars in a sense. And is this not being, you know, super deeply well read in it? I'm wondering, is this like a Gramscian kind of moment, like the hegemony of the order of football is being upset by expectations, and then what does that do? Does that have a consequence in like real politics, or no?
I don't know about Morocco, and we must come, because the question, you know, particularly for Africa as a country, frankly, there is a question I have to ask you all about Africa celebrating Morocco, but we'll come back to that. You know what it is. But I think on the question you're asking, I think it's more interesting to look at the World Cup as a whole, as that kind of moment, decentering the West and the hegemony of the West, and sort of almost a symbolic moment that catches up with what's happening in geopolitics and in other spheres, where you suddenly, you know, the Ukraine moment, where basically, you know, there's this war that essentially NATO versus Putin, like, you think of the old third world sensibility, non-aligned movement. We don't have a horse in that race. Like, but basically the US is expecting us, as in the third world, is expecting the poor of the third world to carry the burden of its sanctions. And no discussion, you know, it's like, okay, we're doing this, this is it, you're going to have to pay this much more for bread, this much more for gasoline, whatever. They have no solutions for the third world. So you sort of saw all the furor, and particularly the British and Western European media over the World Cup. And you sort of come to the World Cup and you say, well, the Global South has a very different set of priorities that it wants on the table. And the sort of selective morality of Western powers of like, now we care about international law because Putin violated it. But we didn't care about international law when we did it, like invading Iraq. We don't care about it when Israel's doing it every day. And that's just not acceptable. And this is a moment where you have that hegemonic assumption of what we put on the table is what matters, going, no, actually it's not. And there's a different conversation starting to be had. The world is collectively facing incredible problems and crises, and we're not going to accept the West deciding how those are going to be resolved, because they're always self-serving, narrow, and at the expense of the majority of people on the planet. And so, you know, this is not a bipolarity. On the contrary, this is a very multipolar moment, and a moment which is very uncomfortable for Western opinion makers, for Western leaders, etc. It's like, oh, we don't really run the world. We talk about this liberal world order, but everyone else has actually woken up to the fact that the liberal world order is literally colonial. I mean, it was literally Western liberalism and colonialism are absolutely intertwined. And the global system it created was a system that's based on property and theft, as in the theft of the resources of the third world that then get codified as a set of property relations. Now I'm channeling Kojo Kawara because I really love this. The Uncommon Wealth. I really highly recommend the history of the British Empire. He's a Ghanaian British Marxist historian. But yeah, I think that is what more than anything is being signified by this World Cup. It's like a cultural reflection of what's happening in the geopolitical space.
And I think, I mean, I just wanted to emphasize something that Tony just said now, which is that, like, on the one hand, you definitely do have, you've got all this hand-wringing from the West, as Tony said, kind of the imposition of standards that the West itself hasn't maintained. And then you have, on the other hand, sort of reactionary weaponization of identitarian arguments to deflect criticism, people saying, no, we must all be cultural relativists again now. One cannot criticize the Qatari states, this and that and the other. So you do have at the level of states a kind of competition for moral high ground. One side trying to stave off its declining hegemony, another side seeing the vacuum and trying to get a piece of the pie. But I think you have this other conversation of people themselves kind of like rejecting both, kind of saying, look, we aren't representatives of the Moroccan state. We don't endorse their politics. We are ordinary people at the grassroots who want to have a stake in the conversation about where the world is headed as this realignment is taking place. And I feel like the World Cup has been the theater where you're seeing that conversation starting to crystallize, which I think is very exciting and presents a wonderful opportunity. And unlike the post-colonial moment when we have to admit at some point that the non-alignment conversation itself was happening at the level of, the states and political figures, and that ordinary people were left out. I think now we're seeing ordinary people wanting to participate in this conversation. And I think the question for, Tony, you said the question for us, the question for everyone is as we progress further and further into this moment, how do we crystallize these efforts to try and chart that alternative way that rejects the kind of bipolar structure of either you align with the West or you align with China, Russia, and those guys.
And just to add to mine is quick. I think you both have said sort of where my head was going, but I think the only thing I would add to this is this question of when those moments happen, and this is to Boima's point of like this Gramscian kind of war of position, like for people who don't read the stuff, like that the struggle is always, like dependent on what's happening. For Gramsci, it's like struggles over hegemony, like who's controlling like the debate, the way we think about these.
Who's making the common sense?
Yeah, who's making the common sense? And I think the terrain is not perfect. So I'll give you two examples what I mean by this. The one is it was held in Qatar, and people were like, so as Will said, it's at the level of the state. Qatar is not the perfect candidate for where you are going to play this thing out that Tony was describing. This kind of the hypocrisy of the liberal left, the liberal state consensus got exposed, like in this moment, like they're hand wringing. Where were you when Russia was? Why didn't you do that for Russia, Robert? So all that plays out in this moment. But and the other one is also you cannot predict what people are going to do. So the one is they flying all these Palestinian flags. Yes, the state in that part of the world will allow for that because that's also partly a sort of lip service on the part of the state. But now it's also people, and it wasn't just Arabs who were in the crowds, Ecuadorians, Mexicans, English people who say, football is coming home, free Palestine. So it's just like the BDS, I've said this in another kind of space, BDS and so on has been fighting so hard to, grapple with the idea of a sports boycott. Like, how can we start a sports boycott? I've grappled with this, Tony has grappled with this, and boom, there's the people in the stands, there's the Moroccan team, boom, out comes the flag. So the terrain is not the perfect terrain. Similarly with Morocco, now people are like, Morocco's calling out Palestine. What is Morocco doing about it? So the terrain is not perfect. It is what you do in the moment. I'll stop there because I'm going ahead of myself.
Yeah, let's get to that. But I want to stop real quick because there's a point that I want to kind of emphasize before we talk about the Moroccan politics, which is kind of the debate that's happening right now on social media. And we'll give a little bit background to what that is. But before the tournament, you, Sean, were conflicted about supporting Brazil, and yes. So I'm a Brazil fan. I used to live in Brazil, and I was not conflicted. I was like, they're gonna win. I don't care about Neymar's. I was against Neymar, if you remember in our radio show, but I was still supporting the team. And I think there's this moment, and I didn't mention my favorite moment from the group stages was actually. I was going into that Cameroon game with like okay, Cameroon has no chance. And normally I'm Africa first, but this was like Brazil's my team, and I was fully on board. I was with the Richarlison narrative. But my favorite moment from the group stage actually was when Aboubakar runs across the field, his goal, takes his shirt off, gets a red card, and gets kicked out of the game. It was perfect. And I think that, like, you know, like your own loyalties can get mixed up in the course of one game, right? Like I was on, you know, Brazil puts its B team on. Okay, I'm team Aboubakar all of a sudden. But so that's the question, is like, can we, before we get to this Morocco conversation, we are all supporting Morocco. Can we, how much can we separate? What is the divide? You know what I'm saying? What is
Brazil for me is specific though. So I know that I have ambivalence about the Morocco thing, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the Brazil thing was just very specific. The Brazil thing was explicitly all the members of that team, with the exception, I think, of, how do you say his name? Chiche?
Not all.
Well, not all, but a lot of them. We know a lot of them openly campaigned for.
Right.
Alisson, I think Alisson's wife.
However, the team is also reflective of the country. You got to recognize that 50%, almost 50% of Brazil are people supporters. You know, it's a society that is in contention. You know,
no, I agree with you. But so there was
that's what the country is, right? Like, you know,
I think we probably also have to acknowledge, as much as we love him and venerate him and you know, genuflect at his shrine, Socrates was something of an exception in the history of Brazilian football. It's not like
a good point.
You know,
that's the same point I make about Argentina. You can be like Maradona, Messi are so brilliant in their feints, the way they play. If you just use another example, that's not generally how Argentinian football is played. So yes, Socrates is an exception. Romario, I think, had a little bit of sort of center leftist politics. But I think I understand, Boima, like probably you're gonna say, like, Sean, you're gonna catch yourself in a minute. But I think it was, for me, just the Brazilian thing was I just couldn't support them for if you want to call it like the leaders, the faces of the team, were too explicit. If they were ambivalent, if Neymar was like supporting Bolsonaro, but he wasn't, he came out and he campaigned for it. Now I don't know. Maybe there's going to be tweets soon of Moroccan players like, you know, I don't know, saying terrible things about Western Sahara or whatever. But I think there's probably said they might be. But I think with Neymar, it was partly the very explicit campaigning for Bolsonaro that just put me off. And also, by the way, Neymar, there's something else here too, Boima, which we're not recognizing. Neymar as a footballer is also not somebody that I naturally will gravitate to and just like. There are other Brazilian footballers that I love.
But you came around to Brazil in the end, right?
It's also about football. It's also about football. The Brazilian thing is also about football.
But you did come around to Brazil, didn't you?
I did come around to Brazil because of Richarlison. Once Richarlison like becomes the embodiment of this team that I kind of always, and also, yes, to your, again now, sometimes it's football, sometimes it's politics. There is something beautiful and satisfying. Somebody wrote about this last week, I think, or the week before. Brazil does what I think the person referred to as these unnecessary flicks. Just things that are just beautiful. Like Argentina will win, Messi will do some nice stuff, but for the rest, it's just ugly. I think Tony had some tweet about how ugly it was. Brazil, it just looks beautiful.
I think half the people are disappointed Brazil's out just so they don't get to watch more of the beauty of exactly box left pass. Like,
well, that's because they don't know how to do it. I think the whole English thing is they have only Gascoigne, Barnes, who can do that kind of thing, and for the rest they don't, and so they're upset. The rest of us, we know that where we come from. Well, yes, I said this to Will the other day, and I think I've said this to you. The thing I love the most about Brazil is
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's township, it's favela football.
Ghana can play like that too. So can Cameroon. So can whoever. But the one
none of them are in. Brazil was our last hope to see that.
What do you think?
Morocco plays it when they're on the break.
On the break. Yeah.
But I just want to say, this little piece of conversation that we're just having actually says something to me also about the World Cup and about ourselves and how we think about and feel football, which is, I mean, the dumbest, it's not dumb because, okay, you have to forgive them. They know not what they ask. When people say to you, who are you rooting for? And it's like, that's like a really strange question because we all go into the World Cup with a very conscious sense, not just of a nationality, not just of like, the idea that this team of players represents the state. They might represent the nation, which is a different idea, like a concept, but also that our affinities, we're all products of migration of a very complex world. We care about social justice, really. That's the lens through which we're going to measure everything. And so the iterations of those concerns are multiple and complex in a World Cup. We love beautiful football. We love justice. We love freedom. We love, parts of the world that are underrepresented. We can always find a narrative for why we want this team to win or that team to win. And it's not, it's not, you were talking earlier about Will liking Richarlison for his club. And I'm like, oh, that would have been a dilemma when Harry Kane's taking a penalty against Lloris.
It was.
But it's complicated. It's
like last World Cup, I loved Croatia. Underdog.
I'm afraid that's
a lot to do with.
We're done. We're done.
No, I know. I know the whole history of Croatia. But I get obsessed with Modric and Mandzukic. I just love this old guy who's like fighting against time and like just throwing his body. He looks like haggard at every game. I don't know. There was other teams, of course. I was wondering. I wanted at that time. I wanted France to win the World Cup and so on. But there was also something about just a sort of small country battling, against those are just things. I wasn't the whole World Cup, but if some games, I'd be like, okay, when they knocked Brazil out, I think, Belgium knocked Brazil out in 2018. But there's just like moments when you pick weird things that sometimes it doesn't make sense.
So let's wade into these waters and talk a little bit about the controversy of the politics with Morocco. And I actually have to, I'm hoping I can intro this, or I'm stepping in to intro this because I have to give a editorial disclaimer that Africa as a country is currently working on a film related to the struggle of the Polisario and the people, the Sahrawi people in Algeria and their relation to the Moroccan government. So just putting that out there, because when we do release this, people will be like, hey, what's going on there? So
you can have two ideas at the same time, but anyway, continue.
Well, I mean, maybe Sean, you should actually unpack that, because what you're saying is some people were saying you can't say Morocco is anything good for Africa because of the Sahrawi people, that you are forgetting, that you have to erase them in order to say that. But so Sean, explain what you mean by two ideas.
Let's first say what the conflict is. Let's just
that's true.
So who wants to just really quickly run down?
Will did a good newsletter for this for upcoming.
But it'll come out. But Boima, you could give some context. Okay. I think you've got the most familiarity. Yeah. So
basically, what's going on is there's a debate. Once the Moroccan team unfurled the Palestinian flag, the debate ensued about what about the Sahrawi people. And the reason why people are drawing those connections is because the Moroccan government is working in cahoots with the Israeli government under pressure from the Trump United States. We have to throw that in there, is that this is a geopolitical thing. Trump wanted recognition by more Arab states of the Israeli government. The Moroccan government conceded as long as that Israel and the United States would recognize their claims in the UN for the territory, which they call Southern Morocco, and what the Sahrawi people call Western Morocco, Western Sahara, which is their kind of declared by the UN, which is their sovereign territory. There is a conflict that is hot conflict. There is actual fighting happening during this World Cup between the Republic of the Sahrawi and the Sahrawi Republic and Morocco, with Algeria also stepping in with support of the Sahrawi, and Spain also stepping in support of Morocco after Morocco was held hostage by the border crisis, the border crisis they created, in which they said they opened the border basically on one day in protest of Spanish support of the Polisario. And that caused all kinds of chaos, and some people died. And so it's a very complex situation that most of the world is not aware of. And so the Moroccan team walks into this, and now the debate is raging on Twitter. So I think the debate is, there was a Westerner, somebody in Boston, who's now deactivated their account, said, I could not in good conscience support the Moroccan team, considering their the policies of the Moroccan government in the Sahrawi land. So let's talk.
So since you asked me like this point of saying like you can hold two thoughts at once, and you have to be also aware of certain political realities. So my argument is basically you can celebrate the victory by Morocco's team, and you can agitate for Western Sahara at the same time. And you have to figure out like what is the right moment also as part of this. Now we've said things here, for example, about the separation between a team and a state, that necessarily the national team is not always just, it's not a one-to-one. It's not like a national team is always representing the state. It represents often the people. I mean, our famous quote.
This team in particular is made up of a lot of people who grew up, born and raised in Europe as well.
Exactly. So those are so it's you have here people that don't even have that everyday experience, of say growing up in Morocco. But then there's a whole bunch of other things to this. This question of where would you agitate for this? So if you're demanding that the Moroccan national team should, because they raised the flag of Palestine, and people was like, oh, they should also raise the flag of the Sahrawi. Well, you also need to know something about Morocco. Morocco isn't necessarily like a democratic state. Mm-hmm. It may have political parties, it does have a parliament, but there are restrictions within that political state, like how you can operate. It's quite authoritarian. So expecting an average a Moroccan player whether or not they're even from the diaspora, to put up their to put up a Sahrawi flag, I don't think it's that easy. You have relatives, you have family, you've got to think of your own person. It's not that easy to do that kind of thing. So we have to think about that. I think, and I know Will wants to say something about that. Like I said, the terrain isn't perfect. So now you have Moroccans declaring themselves on Palestine. That's a starting point to maybe demand some other things about the Sahrawi. Will?
Yeah, no, I think you've said it really well, Sean. And I think appreciating that we're also in a different phase of the struggle for self-determination for the Sahrawi people, and that this is a moment of opportunity, as Sean was saying, to agitate, to raise consciousness, to put the struggle on the map, to alert the rest of the world that this is happening, while at the same time acknowledging that the Moroccan people themselves, the players that represent them, are distinct from that. And there may be a time when those associations are muddied, where we can more legitimately say that, these players are supportive of the state initiatives which are pursued in their name. But I think given where we're at, it makes sense to me that you want to use Morocco's, what they represent, the fact that their triumph over Spain, who has a hand in this mess in the first place, the triumph over, hopeful triumph over France, can be seen as an anti-colonial moment from below, from the people themselves, and use that as the peg to demand consistency from Moroccans to say, well, if you're supportive of Palestine, if you yourselves are interpreting your advances as anti-colonial and in a symbolic way, then you must at the same time show solidarity to the Sahrawi people. And I think that moment of opportunity exists, and there will come a time when we test that. And if, for example, nothing is forthcoming, if the agitation doesn't materialize into concrete support, then maybe we should start the conversation about boycotts of the Moroccan team. But basically, this is an opportunity to kind of force commitments on the part of the Moroccan team and their supporters. And I think that's exciting and that's promising, rather than completely kind of throwing the baby out with the bath.
Canceling.
Exactly.
Go ahead. I want to say something about what you just said, Will, is that I think one lesson that we've been learning in the production of this film about the just energy transition from the perspective of Africa and African governments is that it's really the same conversation. It's that there's pressure on African governments. You're experiencing energy crisis right now, so there's pressure on African governments to deliver things that the West has deprived them of for years, and they're doing so with certain tools. I think that ultimately getting pressure off of what the Sahrawi Republic and the Polisario fight is directly related to how much pressure is on Morocco to fit into this global empirical kind of puzzle. How much does the Moroccan government need to satiate Germany's greed for our energy needs, which is also causing them to build energy farms in Western Sahara? The greenwashing and the football washing, it's all related. So how much does energy independence create? The need to not take all the resources from Western Sahara create an opportunity for the Sahrawi people to have more freedom.
I just want to add something, following on what Will said and what you're saying, what we were discussing earlier, which is the Palestinian flag and what that symbolizes. So it's and hopefully the Palestinian flag as like a souvenir is kind of the Vuvuzela of the 22 World Cup, that people go home with one, right? But I think we shouldn't interpret that in a narrow way. That Palestinian flag, in the case of Morocco, is a dissent from what the state is doing, because the state is not supporting Palestine. The state is actually embracing Israel, right? So basically, and as you said, Boima, that part of the deal for the Abraham Accords was the U.S. kind of recognizing Morocco's claims on Western Sahara. So basically, that's a breach. But even more generally, I think we should read the Palestinian flag at the World Cup as a statement, particularly in the Arab public. The first time, because football, we know, creates safe spaces for dissent in a way. And for the first time, a pan-Arab conversation is happening. And the Palestinian flag symbolizes not only support for Palestine, it actually symbolizes a rejection of the way they're currently ruled. That is profound. That is a huge moment. That is the first time we've seen that spirit since 2011 of people going, we want a different way of being. We want a different way of ruling ourselves. And this symbolized, and it's relatively safe because it's very hard for regimes to overtly clamp down on expressions of love for Palestine. But we know that that's what their policies are in many cases. So I do think it's a profound moment whose meanings are far more than simply, in a narrow sense, Palestine solidarity. Palestine solidarity in itself represents a challenge to a particular political order in the region.
And there are interviews, I think Al Jazeera may have done those interviews in Qatar, where they ask Moroccan supporters, like, why are you waving the Palestinian flag? When I think it was one particular woman, and she said, the government might have a relationship with Israel, but that's not my, that's not my politics. So there's definitely space here for something else. And I think it's just, I don't know, politics is becoming is increasingly about like, you're wrong. So
yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
Twitter is not great for political debate. I don't really. I mean, Africa as a country, as you know, one of the reasons we're having this discussion about this is even Africa as a country has faced a lot of sort of when I tweeted out, saying this is Morocco is the first African team to go to the semifinals of the World Cup. And this is wonderful and great. And then I just saw people came with what about Western Sahara? And I wanted to respond, but at some level you were just like, whatever I'm going to say, how many characters is it? It's never going to be nuanced enough to sort of say, it's fine to fight with you now, but
I think the support of the Western Sahara has been something we've been engaged in. We're currently engaged in. We've been working with Progressive International, who are also the Polisario are specifically reaching out to Westerners to publicize their fight, and they reached out to us. They reached out to Progressive International, and there is this campaign to raise awareness about their struggle. And I wouldn't criticize anybody for raising awareness. I think part of what's unfortunate is that there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction that's happened online where it's like, wait, how dare you criticize my joy? Like, I'm experiencing this great joy and you're just agua fiestas, like you're raining on my parade, but also I think the people who are reacting that way have to also be really self-aware of what they're doing in public and not being reactionary, because this is the same thing that happened with the Russian NATO thing, and there was all this kind of very reactionary things started going on, when really what we are on as leftists is on the side of the liberation of the Sahrawi people, who is a leftist communist regime, and fighting for their.
But not just that. If you look at go ahead. Well, if you just quickly, the Russia-Ukraine thing, it quickly became like what they call the people who wanted the old kind of arguing sort of like a Russian, like Soviet thing, because Russia must be the Soviet Union, so I'm with Russia. Then the Eastern days, even from South Africa, it turns out that if you had some link with the Soviets, whether you were in exile or whatever, or if you know that history, they actually mostly went to Ukraine. So it was just like messy how that stuff played out. And in fact, our attitude was like, no, I don't want war. Is there a way for us to get out of war rather than repeating the lines of the West or repeating the lines of Putin? So that's, I think, similar to this. The question, the point here is like, we cannot rely on the Moroccan state to do this. We can't rely on the AU. We can't rely on the US.
We don't rely on any state.
On Russia. People are going to have to change the situation. And there's something here brewing about what people are doing around the Palestinian flag, to Tony's point. Take advantage of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Also, sorry, the one I feel obliged on behalf of Zinedine Zidane to mention the thing that gets a lot less attention, but and it's not as fraught maybe as the question of Western Sahara in that Moroccan conversation, but Amazigh, right? People come more commonly in Western parlance known as Berber. Basically Morocco's got an Arab identity, but it's also got an African identity, and it's also got an Amazigh identity. And Amazigh are not African. I'm sorry, Amazigh are not Arab, right? And there's a history of sort of struggle in those communities, in particularly Morocco and Algeria.
And they're also struggling currently for the same thing: resource extraction on their territories. Pastoral lands are being.
A number of the coach himself comes from an Amazigh background. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the players, and Zidane, I remember famously that classic interview where Zidane, referring to everybody trying to claim him, as the great French hero, as the great Arab hero, etc., replies and says, "Look, first I'm a Kabyle from Le Castellan, the Kabyle being an Amazigh region in Algeria. Second, I'm an Algerian from Marseille, and third, I'm a Frenchman." Like, these complex identities. You see Amazigh flags flying in the stadium, by the way. It's that flag with the blue. It's got the stripes and then it's got the blue figurine. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of conversations going on in parallel.
If I think we should move on to something to wrap up. If there's anything else anybody wants to say about this, there's a lot there, and you'll see more from us. Africa as a country, I'm sure Tony's work will also touch on these things. But I wanted to ask the wrap up. So we have 4 teams left. Let's talk about them and who do you support and what stories are you most excited about? I mean, obviously the Morocco one's there, but like, do we want Messi to win his cup so he can be mentioned with the greats?
Here's mine. I'll go quick.
Firstly, talking about greatest of all time, the Messi Ronaldo thing was the weirdest. Like, who really wants this? And then my favorite tweet was, Ronaldo may be the GOAT, but today is Eid.
Okay, that closes that debate. Yeah. That's the end of that debate. Here's my thing. So I'm not going to return to GOAT debates. Maradona is still the GOAT. Pele, older people might say it's Pele. Maradona is my GOAT. I'm not changing from that. This is like Michael Jordan versus LeBron. You can never settle it. Done. On the semifinals, to be honest with you, I don't care much for tomorrow's game. And again, the game might surprise me, like the Netherlands, Argentina did eventually. I was paying half attention. I'm going to be honest, I didn't even watch France versus England. I was at a soccer field watching under 13s. I had to drive my child there, but I don't expect much interesting to come from this game. Somebody will probably either score an early goal and then there's disruption, falling around, whatever.
You don't think it's going to be kind of feisty?
It's going to be a lot of fighting and feistiness. This game
willing to fight their way.
Pretty healthy.
I don't know what are the stadiums called? This could be called the butchery of 9-7, whatever. Like the stadiums have numbers.
For injury fans. This one is for injury fans.
Yeah. This could go on forever, and I'd be like, yo, it's time to make dinner, and they still playing. So it's going to be like that. It's not going to be fun. The game
penalties till sunrise.
So I think Argentina will win that thing. I think it's going to be Messi.
Can we ask Will for at least, actually Perisic, who plays for Tottenham Hotspur, is actually the one player on that Croatian team that I actually like watching.
So you do like Croatian players, but let's move on. Earlier he was mad at me. So I'll finish my flurry here by saying France versus Morocco. That's going to be, it could just be anticlimax, and then, I don't know, France destroys them, God forbid. But maybe it's not. Morocco does. Every game is not the same game. Look at Portugal, destroys like Switzerland, can't get past Morocco. It's how you set up. So as long as the Moroccan coach has a game plan, the players turn up, they defend like crazy, and they've
got a heavy injury list.
Yeah, Ziyech looks like he's not in good shape and so on. Mm-hmm. So it's a depleted team. Inshallah, Morocco wins. They go to the final against Messi, and they prevent Argentina from getting that third World Cup. They're gonna get a third World Cup, and we have our first African champion in the history of world football. Amen.
So for the cold water element here, I mean, that's our dream, and we all share that dream. But assuming we get woken up with a cold shower and we're watching a final that's France-Argentina, where does that leave us?
I gotta go with the Messi.
Yeah, probably. I'm gonna. Even though Argentinians are weird on the internet about wanting to even deal with their own history, they've been going at Africa's country all morning, just kind of pretending that stuff didn't happen, or saying, "Oh, it was just maids and coach drivers. Slavery ended and everything was nice again." And they have, some of them have Mapuche names. I would rather go for Messi over France.
So you're leaving?
I'd go to France. I'd go to
Thank you,
France.
Ian Will.
I think I'd love to see. I mean, it would be a replay of 2018 and France to do it again.
The diversity thing to kind of they throw, what is that Dave Chappelle joke? They they spray some whatever crack on it. France sprays a little crack on it with the diversity team.
No, France just picks its best players, and they happen to be mostly African. So, yeah, I mean,
they have no more Arab players. Interestingly, France doesn't have any Arab players of Arab descent in the team. Sorry, Will, you wanted to.
Well, Benzema was injured,
by the way. I mean,
he's not.
Giroud wouldn't even be playing if Benzema.
But I cut Will off. Will was going to tell us he's.
I'm backing France to win it if they make it to final against Argentina. Hopefully, Morocco dispatches them in the semis. But I think another nice thing to look forward to in the semis is the bromance between Achraf Hakimi and Kylian Mbappe. I think it's just so sweet. They're like sending tweets to each other, like, see you in the final, see you in the semi, bro, see you in the semi, see you, my friend. And like, it's just, I'm like, how's that for like a new footballing culture? Just
no, but so I think expanding on that, I think one of the things we really have to look forward to is I think there will be a real sense of kinship among a French team who mostly grew up in the banlieue, and as you know, as the children of migrants and that sort of underclass, and the Moroccan players, they come from the same place. They share the same experience. I suspect that, you know, when the final whistle goes, whatever the result, you'll see the love.
Parties everywhere. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna revise my thing. As much as I don't want France to win because of the crack that they spray, it would be nice to see Mbappe live the World Cup and so on. It will be fine. Maybe over Lisandro Martinez and Fernandez and so on. But I don't know. It's like there's something about people want Messi to win a World Cup. I have a feeling the South wants Messi to win a World Cup. My brother, regular people I know want Messi to win a World Cup. Regular people.
I'm there. I don't want him. I'm saying lack of all the possible permutations. Like if it's, you know, I guess not possible permutations. If it's France, Argentina is the only one. Obviously Morocco, I'm going, but then
Morocco
it's Croatia
wants to win the World Cup.
I think Croatia, France. Clearly, everybody here is France.
I'm sorry, but I have to say this: the metrics are so weird here because basically it's far harder to win the European Champions League than it is to win the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
It's far more of a test. And Messi has won the European Champions League a number of times. He's got nothing left to prove. It's not a higher form of the game. It's actually a lower form of the game.
He's won the European things where you can play.
The historical narrative, though, you got to put him. He's going up against Maradona right now, right? And everybody's saying if he can't deliver to his nation, he will never be on the level of Maradona.
I'm with Boima on that. Do you want
Messi to surpass Maradona? Maradona had politics. Maradona
I just want to say
revolutionary.
Messi is not. Sorry.
I would say that
it's not about surpassing. It's not about surpassing Maradona. It's like if you want to be at the same level as Maradona, which most people think you are. It's Pele, Maradona, and you.
Come on, man.
It's Pele, Maradona, and you. And if it's Pele, Maradona, and you,
lost Will.
We lost Will because of the load shedding.
We should explain to the audience what happened to Will.
Will has been cut by load shedding. The colonial regime wins again.
No, it's a little bit. It's colonial regime, but also just like
I think you mean neo-colonial, but
it's also politics of like energy politics of like not investing, not having a good, living with long legacies, etc. Anyway, my quick last point, because I know we all got to go. All I'll say, and I always say this, like I didn't want to go into the GOAT debate, but I will say this. Messi has won all those cups with Barcelona because you can buy a team. You can, even as great as Messi was, you can put players around him and you can win the championship. As Boima says, for your national team, it's of course you can get a Uruguayan who can become Argentinian, but it's what you get. You have to play with who are members of the nation at that point. He hasn't done it yet. So if he wants to be at that same level, and I think a lot of people kind of want that for him, so be it. I won't feel bad if Argentina wins the World Cup.
I mean, we have to agree to differ on this because I've always loathed this sort of individualized narratives around it's Messi versus Ronaldo. It's like, no, it's not how football is played. Like Maradona was exceptional. Maradona covered Maradona carried
But this is
a
the
mediocre
thing.
team.
This is the thing that if Messi with this team pulls off the win, then you have to put him in the conversation with Pele and Maradona. You just have to. And Ronaldo's out. Ronaldo's out on an island crying in his boat.
He's been out forever. Ronaldo's never been even in.
He's that meme of the boat coming in, but he's going out crying instead.
I don't know. I think it's a very American sports narrative of like, the great man.
But it's not. It's not, because you just said Maradona is at this level, because of what he accomplished individually, right? So Messi will never, in my book, Messi will never be Maradona.
Tony, without the Americans, we've always had debates about the greatest. You know this, Tony. Come on. Maradona versus Pele. You had those debates.
And for me, it's not. I'm not a Messi
I really
fan.
don't do GOAT. I'm not interested in the GOAT conversation.
Listen, I'm a Brazilian supporter. I'm not a Messi fan or Argentina. For me, it's America Latina menos Argentina. But if I can say to my kid, I saw the World Cup where Messi finally got his World Cup, I think that would be a satisfying result for me. That's
okay. I mean, yeah, I respect that.
I think I'm done with the France.
I'm just like, that means Nicola Otamendi is going to get a World Cup.
That's cool too. That Nicolas Otamendi is a world champion is also not a bad move.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Exactly. That's what we have left. If it's not Morocco, what do we have left? Croatia? Or Croatia versus France?
Croatia should not be world champions.
Yeah, maybe we have to lean, I guess.
If Croatia's world champions, nobody's going to take it seriously, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody's going to believe it or kind of take it as a sign of the best team in the world.
I mean, the extraordinary is Croatia's population is like 3 million, right?
Yeah, it's a really little country. It's a small country.
Yeah.
With a guy that looks like he's like 60 with the hollowed out cheeks. Modric.
There's a lot of Croatians in my hometown where I went to the game and as a Brazilian supporter and had to contend with jubilant Croatians running in my face as I stormed out of the bar.
Well, have you jumped up and celebrated the Neymar goal with so much force?
No, I was so incredulous that the Netherlands scored in the 90th minute or the 100th minute that I ran around the bar like a madman. I couldn't believe it.
I don't know why the Netherlands let Virgil van Dijk take the first penalty. Anyway, we have to go. If we don't go now, this will
keep going.
You can
cut this. You can edit this before the end.
You have to edit out the end.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you.
For Will's, in the name of Will, I want to thank everybody for coming and being here. This was wonderful. Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool.